Hello, everybody. Here we are once again looking at the end, really, of the last vestiges of medieval England, going into the era that honestly got to England a little late. We have the Renaissance already hit England as we get to Elizabeth, but it's a little slow for it to spread out of the wealthy classes into the common classes. But as we get out of Elizabeth's era, Elizabeth I, we start to have a return when we talk about James I, and we're going to talk about Charles I today. We have a return from England going from where it was, where there was a parliament with some power, some shared power, and we are moving into kings that want to return England back to its medieval style of absolute power ordained by a religious authority kind of deal. Well, what happens is the English people, along with Parliament at the head, are going to fight against the monarchy and forever change it. And this is going to basically be England's growing pains. It's going to be a moment where England goes from being England to where it goes into the era we know as Great Britain. And as Great Britain, it will become an empire pretty soon after. So this is England growing up here. It's a pretty amazing moment. So here it is. English Civil War is the main topic of the day, 1642 to 1651. And we're going to start with just the background. Charles I. Charles I is the king after James I. And you might remember from the last lecture and from your reading that James I was very interested in turning England into an absolute monarchy again, where the king had more power than Parliament was giving him. But that was proving difficult because Parliament was able to fight him a little bit on that. And James I canceled Parliament and all this stuff a couple times, and it was this ongoing fight. But in the end, James I finally passes away, and his son, Charles I, takes over. Charles I is just like James I in wanting to turn England into an absolute monarchy, but Charles I is not as good of a politician and doesn't know when to quit. And so what you're going to see is the English people realizing that they have no other choice but to rebel when it comes to it. So Charles I is going to actually do a few pretty bad things. He's going to try to arrest members of Parliament in Parliament. He's going to walk into Parliament and try to arrest people. I want you to imagine the American president walking into Congress and just arresting people. That's not going to work. Civil unrest where people are getting really annoyed at Charles I, trying to return England to an absolute monarchy. Charles I eventually realizes that he doesn't have as much support as he thought he did, and he ran up into the north. He goes up into York, which is right at the border between England and Scotland, runs up to York and starts to raise an army, mostly of Scottish patriots, and they're going to be called the Royalists because they support the king. And then Parliament is going to, while the king is gone, is going to start raising its own army, and they're going to be called the Roundheads. Just these names that they have, right? Oliver Cromwell is a member of Parliament who's going to be chosen to lead this new army. Now, the English army is based off of the monarchical system, which is a king that has officers that leads an army, and it's an old-style army. Hasn't really improved much since, say, the 15th century, and here we are into the 1600s. So the deal is that Cromwell is going to have to change England's army, because if you have an army led by Parliament, that army is going to have to go up against the king's forces, which include the knights on horseback, right? Like the modern version of them, includes modern weaponry, includes nobility, includes the Scottish soldiers. So if Oliver Cromwell wants to win any battles for Parliament for the Roundhead side, he's going to have to do something about the army. And what he's going to do is he's going to form a new model army, is what it's going to be called. And it's the most modern army England will have ever had until this time. In fact, it's based off of a number of different models created by both the Spanish Empire, but based on what the people in the Netherlands had to do, and even a new country that's forming called Prussia is using this sort of model. And so Cromwell is basically going to take some current, very modern models and then turn it into an English version. We'll talk more about this as we go. And so this new model army is going to have to go up against the royal military, which has to do with the king's knights on horseback and, the old school military that stays with the king. Let's see. One of the biggest successes that Parliament has is that Parliament is the body of the government that actually paid the Navy. And so if you were in the Navy, you actually supported Parliament more than the king, because Parliament was the purse strings of the kingdom. So the Navy was all about joining Parliament. And then, of course, you're going to have towns that choose sides. And so there's going to be some towns that stay as royalists and some towns that join Parliament, which means that these guys, the people that support one or the other, will be fighting amongst each other, and that's part of the Civil War. It's going to be pretty ugly, the fighting that these guys do. Here's an image of the new model army. This is the first time you see the red coats. This is the beginning of British troops in red coats, and it's all led by Parliament. These guys here in these kind of yellowish mustard colors, those are officers. And then you've got the red coats here of the actual English army under Parliament. An image here in a film. We'll do some film clips in a bit where you're actually looking at these guys with these, they almost look like conquistador Spanish hats, but they're an English version of it. And they've got pikemen, and they've got cannons back here. They've got some cavalry that they can employ. And basically everybody's got the same kind of armor, because it's an army. And then on the other end, what you don't see in this picture are these guys. These guys here are the ones that these dudes protect. These are the ones that provide the wall. And then these guys are the actual musketeers. And these fellows here are using wheel-lock muskets to fire at the enemy. I might do it, I might not. We'll see. Don't get excited. Okay, so the deal is that you've got two parts of this army. You've got the pikemen with heavy armor on, and you've got the musketmen right here. And these guys can be trained pretty quickly to do their job. And Parliament under Cromwell is going to utilize these guys very well. And
2 years after Charles I raised his royal standard at Nottingham, starting the English Civil War, the conflict had reached a stalemate. Of the 16 battles of 1643, the Royalists had won 10 and Parliament 6. 1644 had proved equally indecisive. At the outbreak of war, both the King and Parliament relied on raising volunteer companies of soldiers, often led by local landowners. These soldiers were mostly untrained, lacking in experience and reluctant to fight outside their own counties. Commanders relied on outdated military manuals, and each soldier carried with them a copy of the Soldier's Pocket Bible, containing quotes to strengthen their resolve. Supplies were scarce, often leading to soldiers having to plunder houses they passed for food, clothing, and, because pay was irregular, other items they could sell. On the 3rd of September 1642, Nehemiah Wharton wrote, "We marched near 12 miles without sustenance. Our soldiers drank stinking water, and when we came into Barby in Northamptonshire, our soldiers pillaged the parson of this town, and brought him away prisoner, with his surplus and other relics." To break the impasse, on the 6th of January 1645, Parliament's Committee of Both Kingdoms authorised the creation of the new model army, the first standing army of Britain. This would consist of 22,000 professionally trained soldiers in cohesive military units, replacing separate regiments led by individual commanders. The new model army would be led by Sir Thomas Fairfax and Philip Skippon, although Oliver Cromwell would ultimately become second in command. The new model army's infantry soldiers, wearing their distinctive red uniforms, were to be paid 8 per day. Cavalry officers got 2 shillings, and generals £1. The early months of 1645 were spent in training, and by April the new model army was ready for battle. Their first test was at Naseby in June, the first full-scale pitched battle of the Civil War, and one of its most important.
Attack order. Double line abreast. Forward. Forward!
The man must be mad.
Prepare to attack. Prepare to attack! Our swords are in God's hand, and our fate is in the Lord. Charge! Fire! Advance! To the rear!
The new model army was victorious. This was followed by another decisive victory for Parliament at Langport in July. Taken together, these two battles ended the King's chances of victory. The creation of the new model army, bringing with it a new level of professionalism, organisation and training, as well as new tactics, had proved to be decisive.
It's going to be the basis of the next version of the English army, those redcoats that march all over the place and conquer things, right? How does the war end? I know there's lots more I'm going to be telling you, don't worry. How does the war end? In 1648, Charles I is captured and executed. There's a battle. The forces of Parliament under Cromwell will readily defeat the king's forces over and over again until we actually have the king captured in 1648. In he's executed, all right, in 1649, the year after. And during that time, Charles I is going to be replaced by Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell is going to be ruling England as Lord Protector. There's going to be no king, guys, no king for 10 years, between 9 years, 1649 till 1658. So for 9 years, Cromwell is going to rule. Cromwell, there's bigger stories in your book about this, but Cromwell is not very well liked in a good part of England, although he does get rid of a tyrant king and creates a new version of the English army that's going to take England into its empire days. The other reality is that Cromwell is going to rule as an autocrat. He's almost as bad as Charles I was as far as being an absolute ruler, because people were afraid of him. Why were people afraid of him? He was in control of the army, the most powerful force England had ever seen. Cromwell was in charge of it. And so Cromwell is in charge of the military, and Cromwell is in charge of England. And so during the time that Cromwell is in charge, he not only uses that army to cement his control over England, but he takes that army into Ireland and wipes out a bunch of people there in some fighting against the Irish. And he takes his new model army into Scotland and fights there as well. So most of the British Isles are not fans of Cromwell because he killed a lot of people in Scotland and especially in Ireland, trying to put down rebellions there. And during this time, again, 1648 to 1658, there is no king. It's just Cromwell. Okay, so Cromwell dies, and his son takes over, almost like he's a king, right? There's a hereditary system here. Cromwell dies, and Cromwell's son takes over. He's not a good ruler. The son is not a good ruler. And what ends up happening is, because he's so bad, Parliament, a couple years later, in 1660, are going to quietly offer the son of the king that Parliament executed, Charles II, who's hiding in France. They're going to offer the son a chance to become the king. let's get back to having a king again. As long as Parliament tells Charles II, as long as you obey the rules, the system of Parliament sharing power with the king, as long as you understand how this works, you can come and be our king. It would be a legitimate thing because you are the son of the last king. Charles II agrees, and Charles II even promises amnesty and religious toleration between the Anglicans and the Catholics and the Puritans that were there too. Okay, so now here's the deal. I'm about to tell you about one of my favorite weird things that happened in English history. Charles II, I guess I should preface this by saying that this is not all that unusual. The drama or the presentation of royal courts is part of what we're talking about when we talk about this stuff. And the presentation of it is that Charles II is going to want to basically do a dramatic event where he punishes Cromwell for having killed his father and initiated a parliamentary rebellion. This is just part of Charles II getting closure for the royalty because he has to show that rebellions are not okay under the new rule. So Charles II is going to have Cromwell's body dug up. Cromwell's body is going to be accused of treason. There's going to be a court trial where Cromwell, it's kind of it's almost a joke trial in a way. Cromwell, his body is hanged, and therefore there is a symbolic end. I know this is weird, but this totally happens. All right, it's this total actual trial where a dead body is there covered in lye and spice and stuff that keep it from smelling so bad, being accused of treason and then hung in an official execution. Isn't that something else? This is not the only time that's ever happened. It's kind of weird, and it's kind of medieval, really. Not something you hear about in the later periods.
Within 2 years of Cromwell's death, the monarchy was restored. The new king, Charles II, ordered Cromwell's body to be strung up like a traitor. It was an ignominious end for a man who'd wanted to create God's kingdom on earth.
King Charles II dies, King James II becomes the king, and King James II, just like his namesake, James I, tries to make religious toleration between Protestants and Catholics a thing, meaning the Protestant English are going to get really mad about this, and the Protestants are the ruling class. And so they're really angry that James II is doing what James I had done a couple reigns ago. And James I had, remember, tried to make Catholicism a more equal religion in England, and people rebelled against it. And so here we go again, and James II is now doing it. These royals don't really seem to learn that there's a point of time where there's things that they just shouldn't do, right? But they just keep doing it anyway. I don't know why. And so finally what ends up happening is that a lot of the citizenry and Parliament, as a result too, are very angry at James I. Here we go again, right back into more autocratic rule. And so quietly, once again, in 1688, Parliament is going to invite James II's daughter, James I's daughter, Mary, to come rule. Mary is an English woman who was married to a royal from the Netherlands. So a Dutch husband and Mary, who is English. Okay, so Mary is living in Holland and sitting there in a palace, right? And then Parliament sends for her because she is part of the royal line of the royals of England. And so Mary is asked, hey, would you and your husband like to become the king and queen of England? We have a neat opportunity for you. As long as you guys understand that Parliament's really in charge and you guys are ruling as the moral authority of England, we would really like you to come over because we think that you could probably handle this. And the Netherlands had been like this for a while. The Netherlands have been doing a bit of a constitutional monarchy for a bit. So Parliament is thinking maybe this is our end. Maybe we can have Mary and her husband from the Netherlands, William III, come and rule instead, as long as they can get rid of the current king who's becoming a problem, James II. And they do. Mary and William raise an army over in Holland, and that army is joined by some of the English dissidents under Parliament. And this English and Dutch army will come into England and chase James II out of the country. James II has to go in hiding. He is banished from England. And here is William and Mary. This is called the Glorious Revolution because it was a war without bloodshed. It was a revolution without bloodshed. And basically, these two are going to rule England like CEOs, like joint rulers. And they rule it, again, not as absolute monarchs, but they rule England as if England was a company. And they were simply at the head of the board. And that's what they do. And therefore, under William and Mary, a lot of reforms happen. Here's a whole bunch of them. One of them is that you're going to see a Bill of Rights formed. In 1689, there's going to be a Bill of Rights. And what the Bill of Rights will state is that the king cannot make laws. Only Parliament can make laws. That is now set down on a piece of paper, a Bill of Rights, almost like a constitution that the king and queen sign. The monarch must get his money from Parliament. So the monarch cannot raise his own money or his own taxes. All of that has to come through Parliament. That's what anchors the king to the people. And the king can only maintain a standing army when Parliament says it's okay. These are some of the big parts of the new Bill of Rights in 1689 that William and Mary are going to approve forever. Okay, there's also this thing called the Mutiny Act. The Mutiny Act ensures that Parliament would be prorogued every year by requiring approval of the armed forces on a yearly basis, meaning there's a vote in Parliament. I know it's a very fancy word. There's a vote in Parliament every year to approve of the current armed forces, meaning Parliament has the right to disband the armed forces whenever they want. So it's not going to become some big tool of a tyrannical king or something. The Bank of England is formed for the first time. You're going to have a bank that is going to actually finance the government, meaning the bank is going to collect taxes, hold on to that money. It's not going to be in the hand of the king or of some leader of Parliament like Cromwell was doing back in his day. And England is going to be in charge, just kind of like the American Federal Bank is in charge of our federal dollars. And that allows England to save up money and then use it on bigger ventures like going and building an empire one day, which is about to happen, right? There's already an empire with the American colonies, but England wants more. Let's see. And finally, the Settlement Act of 1701 forbids any wars without Parliament's consent. So that means that not only is Parliament in charge of the army, can actually cancel or raise an army and fund the army, but Parliament is in charge of declaring wars, which is what the U.S. Congress is like. So this is a very modern thing. It's taking a lot of power from the king. And judges, the judges of England, are now removed from being punished by the king. So if judges reading English law do something the king or queen doesn't like, the king or queen can't do anything about it. The judges are now protected. And to get rid of a judge, you have to impeach them by Parliament, by a parliamentary vote. You guys, this is the very first version in the Western world of something that is much like what the United States is going to have. This is the very first version of separate but equal styles of government. The king and Parliament and the judges, along with a separate treasury. All of these are ways of separating the branches of government in England. It's not quite so well spread out the way that the American constitutional system is. But come on, let's be fair. The American constitutional system isn't going to come out for over 100 more years. Not until, just under 100 years. It's going to be 87 years that the American Constitution comes out. So this is a pretty interesting thing. When we think about the United States being the first to have separate branches of government, the reality is that that idea is based not only on some philosophy, like people like John Locke and Montesquieu and Rousseau that were actually active at this point in time and were definitely an influence, but you guys, England had already done it. Was already involved in separating out its government. And that's going to help England move forward without being stuck at the whim of a king and what that king wants to do. Just as I was mentioning, this is also the same time that England is going to, with open arms, embrace a lot of this stuff, which is going to help it become an empire. France will embrace the scientific revolution, but won't really do much with it. France will not allow scientific inventions to go far without royal approval, which is very slow. And so it doesn't really do much there. It's just people talking about it. But here in England, the scientific revolution is going to lead to advances in astronomy and biology, chemistry, medical care. All of that's going to be a big part about what the English do. On top of the scientific revolution comes people that want to explore. And that means the English Navy is going to start to take on a role of exploring by sending English ships around with explorers to discover new things, because they are scientists that are curious about the natural world. Why that's important is because the English Navy traveling around the world with explorers on it that are part of the scientific system in England, those people are going to be the ones that discover new species and also new lands that England will one day want to conquer, right? So they're going to be drawing out the maps that the English can use when they build their empire. The Enlightenment is part of the governmental system that is in England that is going to be met with a certain amount of success. This is part of it. This whole thing is part of the success of the Enlightenment earlier on. That Enlightenment will ironically lead to a revolution in America to separate from English power, but that's not for a little while yet. Still got about 65 years. So the Enlightenment, John Locke, all men are created equal. Montesquieu, the separation of powers that England is playing around with. John Smith, free trade and capitalism. That's really where England is going with these guys. England is going to be moving towards the idea of having separate corporations really running the show while these guys just manage the country. And so we'll talk more later about the English East and West India companies. And those companies are really going to be in charge of conquering the English Empire. Not the Royal Army, but the East and West India companies. We'll get to that later, okay? That's not even in this lecture. And so there's a lot happening here where England is modernizing itself faster than I would say most of the rest of Europe. Finally, 1702 to 1714. In 1707, there is this very short-lived reign of Queen Anne. Queen Anne is going to do one major thing during her rule, one major thing. Queen Anne is going to finally unite Scotland, Wales, and England together. Ireland, not yet. Ireland is still not a big fan of England, and they're still fighting between the two, okay? But in 1707, Scotland, Wales, and England become a commonwealth. Take a look here. We have the English flag of St. George. We have the Scottish flag. We combine them together, and we get something that you recognize. Now, the flag is, there's more to it now because Ireland, but there it is. This is the beginning of what will become the United Kingdom, which is really the United Kingdoms, right? It's what this is. So between 1702 to 1714, you're going to see the creation of what is going to be known, finally, as Great Britain. No longer England with these other guys around, with Scotland and other guys. It is now Great Britain. This is an amazing moment. There it is. Okay. So next week, you guys, we're going to be talking about the rise of empire. It has to do with the political instability in England since the 14th century that is now over. And so we just talked about it, the Glorious Revolution with William and Mary, and of course the creation of Great Britain. And we're going to be looking at how a new market economy is going to lead to exploration, and it's going to lead to conquest, and it's going to lead to empire. And that's kind of where we're going as we get towards the end of our semester. So just as a recap, the monarchy is more of a CEO than an absolute ruler, and England is going to be focusing on its external world as opposed to always fighting amongst itself over who gets to be the next king, like we had with so long now, right? Parliament versus the king, or the War of the Roses, where it's various families against various families. We're not going to see that stuff so much anymore. Parliament is now in charge, and the monarchy finally gets it, okay? They finally get it. So England can move forward, okay? So of all the truly modern nations in all the world, in this Western sense of having a separation of powers, you're going to have Britain and the Netherlands and Prussia. Prussia's a new country that we're not really getting into. That's more of a world history, Western Civ kind of story. But there are three major nations that are modernizing. You notice I do not have here France or Russia or Spain, right? These are the guys that are modernizing themselves into being the new leaders of this next era of history. So we'll see you next week.